for your favorite game show, Is This A Najeela Card? Welcome everyone to the first real episode of Is This A Najeela Card? I am your host, Callahan, and today we are going to be asking this question about 10 cards from the upcoming Warhammer 40k Commander set. Joining me today as my judge on the matter is our Najeela expert himself. Is Dr. near Dr. Pongo. How are you doing today, Pongo?
Good. Glad to be here as always. And we're getting close. We're very, very close. I was just
we're very close.
About
that. I'm really glad they started wording near doctorates. I was worried about people feeling like they had to get the whole way done.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. If you had to do the whole thing, it would be a disaster.
This is truly tragic. Also joining us today are our two contestants. First, from the great state of Nevada out west, is the lovely Sage. Sage, how are you doing?
I'm like, oh yeah, that is me. I'm newly located to Nevada, but I'm wonderful. Thank you. This is exciting to be on, I guess the actual real feed.
Yeah, this is your, I guess the first time that you're on a proper Mind Sculptors podcast that isn't like an awards show thing. And our
really?
other, yeah,
that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it actually is wild. It's scheduling with Sage was difficult there for a while. And also joining me today is, of course, you've been hearing him talk and meme over everything that I've said, is from the OK state of Massachusetts, Mr. Comedian. Did you know Ian is in your name, Ian?
I can't believe you've brought this to the Mind Sculptors.
How are you doing today, buddy?
I'm great. Anytime a chance I get to shitpost with friends, it's always a good time.
Yeah, always a good time.
I mean, this is a very serious thing.
Yes, this is very, very serious review. Very serious topic podcast episode today.
Mm-hmm.
And so how our game today is going to work is we have 5 rounds with 2 cards in each of them. And basically what's going to happen is you are both basically what's going to happen is we have a little buzzer here that unfortunately only I can hear that Ian has definitely not been taking advantage of. And it's basically they will buzz in. Whoever buzzes in first will give their analysis of the card. And then our resident Najeela expert, Mr. Almost Dr. Pongo.
Resident Pongo.
Yes.
It's a new horror game series coming out soon.
But Pongo will kind of rate their assessment of the card and give out a point or some points for it. So it's a very whose line is it anyway? The points really don't matter. But we're also going to gamify this a little bit. So without further ado, it is time. We need the what is it? The Who Wants to Be a Millionaire sound. It's time for round 1.
Oh, what? Sorry, there's someone at the door. I think they have a cease and desist.
Bum, bum, bum.
First card of round 1 is Ultramarines Honor Guard. It is 3 colorless and a white creature, Astartes Warrior. That is a 2/2 with Squad 2, which Squad is an additional cost to cast the spell. You may pay 2 colorless any number of times. When this creature enters the battlefield, create that many tokens that are copies of it. And the creature's ability is other creatures you control get +1/+1. So contestants, is this a Najeela card? All right, Ian, you got to it first. Ian, is this a Najeela card?
Well, Najeela does have creatures, so the fact that this says other creatures you control is technically a relevant line of text. Now, as far as my awareness of the Najeela archetype, it is a 5-color good stuff shell with a very powerful commander. So when I see a card like this that anthems your entire board for a whopping 4 to 6 to 8 to etc. mana, and look at Najeela, and definitely what the needs of the deck say to me is that this is not that.
So it's not quite.
No, this
so we
is
have
not a Najeela card.
We have a no from Ian, and Sage, what is your kind of take on it?
So I think getting an Anthem for like +3/+3 for like 8 mana is definitely not great. Not a great rate. I mean, you might, if that's what you want, you might as well run True Conviction for a more impactful like board presence. But so definitely not a Najeela card.
Okay, so Pongo, our contestants here seem to think that this is not a Najeela card, and are they right? Is this not a Najeela card? Is this an on-fire garbage?
This is an on-fire garbage can. Yes.
To keep the 2 ratios.
To keep this educational, I suppose. When I look at this card, obviously, the token text on this card, and this is going to be a recurring theme, is that it says warrior. And obviously that's an upside in Najeela. I consider that the squad aspect of this card something that you're probably not actually really going to take advantage all that often, just because 6 mana for 2/2/2s that pump up your board that needs to be reasonably established for this to really have a major effect is probably a little too win more at the end of the day. Ian did sort of really hit the nail on the head there. Najeela is a 5-color good stuff deck. There is a little bit of an allowance for some synergy. But that synergy needs to be efficient enough. And it also needs to be along an axis, a more interactive axis typically. So, you will see some people including cards like Shatterfang as a combat enhancer because that has like a lot of synergies, not just with Najeela, but with other cards in the deck. And most importantly comes down for 3 mana. For similar cards to this that aren't being run, my mind immediately would go to something like Paladin class, which I would probably play like well before I would ever play this card, just because for only the 1 mana that you pay to start, you get a very relevant effect, which is that tax on your turn, which can actually help you play more proactively by turning off people's interaction on your turn. And then by the time you get to 4 mana, you've essentially copied the Anthem effect. But not only have you done that, you have also split up the mana cost across multiple turns, which is nice. You don't have to hit 4 mana to start. And then you also kind of have the ability to then spend 5 mana on the following turn and get a really fairly broken effect that also enhances combat. Another really, really powerful card that I would play well before this would be, and probably before before Paladin class, or rather I would play Paladin class before this card that I'm about to talk about, is Shared Animosity. Shared Animosity is a 3 mana enchantment, 2 in a red. And it says whenever a creature you control attacks, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking creature that shares a creature type with it. So you can naturally stack the triggers so that you've created warriors, and then this triggers, which means that the warriors that were declared attacking will see the new warriors that are themselves attacking, and you get some really, really powerful attack bonuses that way. Which means that the math on it is that people die very quickly, without getting too specific. And then a final card that I think is like miles better, and I would probably play maybe even before Shared Animosity, and Ian is going to appreciate this, but I'm going to have to dock points because you didn't mention him, is Jetmir. Who, if I needed to play, something that was purely just a combat enhancer, it would be Jetmir. Jetmir even before. Jetmir, the math on that is once again that people die exceptionally quickly in conjunction with Najeela, to the point, to such an extent that I actually have, I run it quote unquote in sort of my more memey, hidden commander Winota, with hidden commander Jetmir, Najeela, brew.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So you just have a Najeela list that is inside of it decks that I play seriously at tournaments.
Well, so the original conceit of that deck was, Pongo X Rebel, right? And
it just turned into Pongo X Ian.
It ended up turning into a menage a trois that comedian was that Ian, you were not actually aware that you were a part of, with Winota being included alongside Sisse, Weatherlight Captain.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, so I think Ian, you raised good points. You're absolutely right. Sage as well. Obviously, kudos to you for agreeing with Ian. And I'm going to go ahead and award Ian 5 points.
5 points. Ooh. All right. So 5 points there for Ian for buzzing in first. Our next card it's another squad creature, which is Vanguard Suppressor. It costs 3 colorless and a blue Astartes warrior that is a 3/2 with flying and has the ability Suppressing Fire. Whenever Vanguard Suppressor deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So contestants, is this a Najeela card? Sage, is this a Najeela card?
I'm going to go with no, because while a 3/2 flyer is pretty attractive, it's for 4 mana, and while it is nice to be able to draw a card off of combat damage, that's going to be something that's going to pair better with Tymna, or like in a Tymna-based shell. And having the squad 2 to get extra copies of it for like 6 mana, if they get to attack in uncontested, if they do combat damage, you get to draw 2 cards. Like, there are definitely much more efficient value engines. Like, for that rate, you might as well just run like Biden of Thassa in order to draw cards when all of your creatures deal combat damage. So just for the rates alone, it is.
Yeah. Ian, your thoughts on it as well?
So the art, I assume, is going to be on the screen at the current moment, right?
Yes.
Or at least the picture of the card. Yeah. So while I agree with everything Sage is saying at the current moment, I also think that until this point, Najeela really hasn't had access to guns. So I think it's really important to recognize the fact that Najeela could have a Gatling gun. And I think Najeela was scary enough as it is. So if a Najeela is being backed up by a thick Marine with a Gatling gun, or I guess
a literal heavy tank.
A literal heavy tank. I was already terrified of Najeela, but I'm also scared of bullets. So I'm gonna say yes, this is a Najeela card.
Okay, so we've got a yes from Sage, or a yes from Ian, and a no from Sage. Mm-hmm. So Pongo, is this a Najeela card?
I'm just saying, Ian, have you seen the arms on Professional Facebreaker? Because Najeela definitely has access to guns.
You know, those arms.
Yeah, I mean, our co-hosts here absolutely, once again, I think raise excellent points. I think Sage raises probably the most important points, which is
you mean the guns isn't an important point?
Well, listen,
this is America, Pongo.
Yeah, this is America.
That's fair. That's true.
I guess American, you know what, so. Ian, you didn't play to your audience. That's the issue. That's
yeah. So without turning this episode into the garbage can, on fire garbage can, we'll move away from the gun conversation. But yeah, so certainly the point about this card, the rate of this card is a really, really important one. Again, the warrior text does not offset the fact that, for 4 mana, as Sage mentioned, you could play something like Biden to Thassa. More importantly, you could be playing something like Toski, which is a card that, quite a few people do play in Najeela, and it's not an absurd card to play. I've tried it out in the past, and at 4 mana, it's a much stronger card than this is, and I've found it too slow. This card certainly does not reach the ceiling of Toski. And the floor of it is also just relatively weak, right? Because I'm not playing Grob, Okame Adversary anymore, and that's basically just like a 2 mana.
Or went out
version.
For the homies.
Yeah, this is basically a 2 mana version of this card a lot of the time. The issue being that compared to something like Mindblade Render, it needs to attack, it needs to connect. So that makes it much slower. It makes it more Dark Confidant speed as opposed to Mindblade Render, which draws a card typically when it comes down, or does an impression of turn 1 Najeela if you can play it off of a Chrome Mox. So there just really isn't a slot for cards like these. The flying is nice naturally, but it just compares poorly to a lot of other options that the deck currently doesn't play.
I will say to any Najeela pilots out there who are looking for card draw, I cannot recommend Rafine enough to you. The card is straight gas in Najeela decks. It is.
Yeah.
Especially if you're doing anything with your graveyard, Rafine, like, just, it is exactly like the perfect type of filtering.
Yeah.
So Sage buzzed in first, got the answer correct. How many points are you going to give Sage on this one, Pongo?
So I'm gonna give Sage, I think, 6 points for raising a very cogent point, and I'm going to give Ian 2 points for making me laugh.
Okay.
Sweet.
So after our first round, that brings us to the comedian. Did you know that your name, Ian, is in that, by the way?
I'm gonna hang up this phone call immediately.
So that places Ian at 7 points and Sage at 6 points. So now it is time. What'd you say?
I said tight race.
Tight race, very tight race. That moves us over into round 2. Starting us off for round 2 is our first, and I'm pretty sure only non-creature spell of this entire review. And that is Deny the Witch. It is a 1 colorless white, blue, black instant that says counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. Its controller loses life equal to the number of creatures you control. So, contestants, I'm going to ask you, is Deny the Witch a Najeela card? All right, Sage got there first. So Sage, Deny the Witch. Is this 1 colorless and an Esper counter spell good enough in Najeela because it's also kind of an exsanguinate to some degree?
All right. Well, while I love that they have a card for Deny the Witch because it's one of the saves that you make in 40k, which is, I don't know, anyway, against spellcasters. The color intensity on casting this is ridiculous. Like it's a disallow plus an exsanguinate, and that is not great. Like, how often, like, if you do enough damage to someone where they would die, like, you're winning anyways, and I don't think you need to I don't think you need a counterspell to back that up with.
Yeah. Okay. Ian, you have the floor now.
Yeah, so I think just even before we start like thinking about the application of the card, there are many people like me, and I assume a lot of Magic demographic sort of falls into this, where if a witch were to proposition you as a human being, I know I would not say no. So the idea that not only would I deny a witch, but then make a card about it to mock the aforementioned witch who has propositioned you, I think
it's just really rude, isn't it?
It's extremely heretical, and I believe that even in the flavor text it says the heresy cannot stand, and I think the heresy is the initial denial of the witch itself. So this card is
pro chaos over here.
This card is poppycock, and I will have none of it. Also, it's a bad Magic card.
I wouldn't even run this in casual. Oh my god.
Yes,
okay.
That.
So Pongo, it seems like we've got a pretty conclusive statement over here. What are your thoughts on the card?
Yeah, just don't play 4 mana pieces of interaction, basically, right? Like, for 4 mana, I expect something to have the same impact as something like a culling ritual, right?
Yeah.
Whereas this is something that you're going to need to somehow find 4 mana at some point in the game, to pass the turn with, to hold up. to counter somebody's, 1 or 2 mana spell, which is not mana efficient. And so, normally you want your counter spells to, be less mana than the spell you're countering so that you can double spell. You can do something on your turn and then hold up interaction at the same time. So yeah, don't play 4 mana interaction. Just don't. Like Sage was saying, I wouldn't even play this in casual.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and mostly because you don't want to deny the witch.
So I was going to say, I think Sage raised a good point that you shouldn't even be playing this in casual. So for that, I'm going to give Sage 8 points. And
8 points.
And Ian, I'm turning you into a frog.
Okay. So what God damn it. What was that card that was in that Rebel pulled out of her cube over the weekend? That had the tap. No, it was like tap.
Omnibian.
Omnibian, that
yeah.
one. Yeah.
Yes.
He has Omnibian you. All right, so clear the buzzers here, and
Not
we will go
pongified?
to
Yeah, I
not
was gonna say.
pongified.
And not referencing the card,
That would make
turn to
too
frog.
much sense.
We
Witches
can't
don't
reference
turn
the card
things
turn to
into-
frog.
but see,
Witches
the
turn
thing,
things into frogs. They don't turn things into monkeys.
Frog lizards.
but my favorite
Whoa.
thing about what was it again?
Omnibian.
Omnibian is that it doesn't change like
Anything relevant about
anything
the card.
relevant. It just makes it a frog, and it's a 3/3, and that's it. And that's all it changes. It still has all of its abilities, all of that stuff. And I think that's
Puts
you
an extra
still have
toughness
all
on
of it.
Najeela. What are you talking about?
And that's really relevant if you use it on the Gitrog monster because you've literally turned it into a 3/3 instead of a 6/6.
Yeah,
has death touch.
it's true.
It's no longer a horror either, which is exceptionally relevant.
No, it doesn't lose other types. It just
Oh, it
becomes a
doesn't
frog.
lose other types.
Yeah, it just becomes a frog.
It doesn't
so
gain
bad.
any types. It just becomes
it
a
is
3/3.
It is this, and it is delightful. But anyhow, the next card for round 2 is Celestine, the Living Saint, which is a 4 colorless and a white human warrior legendary creature that is a 3/4 with flying and lifelink, and it has the ability Healing Tears. At the beginning of your end step, return target creature card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of life you gained this turn. So, players, is this a Najeela card? And right away we have Ian buzzing in. So, Ian, is this totally not Angel a Najeela card?
So, fun fact, this is a human that you can cheat onto the battlefield, hypothetically with a card, I don't know, like Winota. And I have said publicly in that server that I do not like this card. So imagine having to cast this card and then wait a turn for it to attack.
That's
End of
true.
Sentence, dropping microphone, walking away.
Not a mic dropping sentence, a sentence dropping microphone.
Well, to be fair, you don't have to. It doesn't technically have to attack. You could have activated Najeela that turn as well.
The good old
You're
fashioned
right.
10
That
mana
changes
turn.
10 mana,
everything.
you know.
I hadn't thought about that.
You know,
Good
you know,
point.
that's just a good Christian use of mana. Okay.
Thank you.
Sage, what is your opinion on the card?
Well, if you're doing a Najeela hidden Winota commander, I think you totally run this because one, Najeela and Winota together, they form the foundations for the Adeptus Sororitas, who Celestine is like the living saint for. So absolutely, and plus the synergy with Najeela's activated ability, it's a flavor win.
I need so Pongo. Do you know anything about? Or before we even get Pongo's reactions, quick poll among the people who are here. Who knows anything about Warhammer outside of these cards?
I fucking love Can we?
Yeah.
I've gathered
Oh, no,
that.
I played a lot of Warhammer.
I
when
love
was young.
Warhammer 40k lore.
Okay.
Attempting to understand what Sage said has caused some blood to start oozing out of my ear.
I have heard what you have said. I have processed that information, and it has come out the other end, and it just has it's the same. It's like when I eat corn. It just
I don't want to hear about your fecal properties. Thank you so much. And neither does I think maybe our audience.
No, I think our audience definitely
Can we
wants
give
to know
minus
about my
points
bowel
to
movements.
Callahan?
I will say these commander decks have inspired me to at least know a little bit about the 40k lore, because I think the amount of like really cool art or like weird backstories I've heard about looking at these decks, I'm like, oh, they actually have a really rich universe, and I'm actually kind of curious about how that goes.
Yeah. So Pongo, back to the question at hand. Is Celestine, is that how I say the word? The name Celestine?
Yeah.
A Najeela card?
It's not a particularly hard name. Yeah.
Well, you know,
Celestine, obviously.
listen, I've ruined worse names, so easier names. So
I used to be Commissar.
Shakira. So is this a Najeela card?
No. Surprise.
Okay.
Horseshit.
I do have some points to award.
Okay.
Sure.
Despite the fact that, it was completely wrong. I do think Sage's take was exceptionally based. And as such, I will be giving Sage 69 points.
Nice.
69
Yes,
points.
queen.
Comedian, I will be granting you 34 points for a correct
Okay.
answer.
Okay.
For buzzing in first, mind you. Being the one who actually buzzed in, that's what you got.
I slammed that buzzer. I'm not gonna
You really did.
This was mostly to inform the Winota pilots in the audience that this card is a trap.
I mean, look, we've got to do our duty. This is an educational program.
It
For
is
sure, for
indeed an educational program. So that makes the points after round 2. Ian, the comedian. Hey, did you know that Ian is in your name?
Oh my god. Goodbye.
Callahan, it's enough.
Every time.
Yeah. So Ian with 41 points, and Sage with a crisp, what is that? 77 points. So
This game's rigged.
it is indeed a little. Or excuse me, no, no, it's more than that. It is. It should be 83 points. 83 points.
Oh shit.
It's okay. We're entering into the really high point rounds now.
Yeah. So now we're moving
Is that
into.
how this works?
Yeah.
Okay.
Double or nothing now.
It's the higher we get in it, the more high we are. Did I forget to tell you guys that?
Damn! I should have packed a ball.
Okay.
I did not see this next one coming.
Okay. So the next card, so we go to round 3. And the first card on our list here is Commissar Severina Raine, which is a legendary human soldier that's a 2/2 that costs 1 colorless, a white, and a black, and has the 2 different abilities. One is leading from the front. Whenever Commissar attacks, each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of other attacking creatures. And Summary Execution, which is a static ability, or an activated ability, that costs 2 colorless and sacrifice another creature. You gain 2 life and draw a card. So let me clear the buzzers here. And players, is this a Najeela card? Ian, you have buzzed in first. Ian,
Quick draw.
is this a Najeela card?
I actually I don't think it's good enough, but I think this by far is the closest thing to a Najeela card we've seen. I think the card is definitely a unique card, and if you're playing like a token-esque strategy or a strategy that goes wide, the card is definitely at least interesting. The fact that it is card draw and technically speaking like a clock on your opponent is kind of cool. Unfortunately, as the serious answers of this show are going to point out, the threshold for cEDH viability is ridiculously high, because you're competing with like 20,000 other cards, especially in a 5-color deck, right?
Right.
So the idea that this drain and gain card, despite actually being like a really solid rate, is unfortunately just gonna probably fall flat.
Yeah, and that's evaluating it as far as a Najeela card, obviously. Just so we're clear for the viewers at home, Sage, is the Commissar a Najeela card in your opinion?
Yeah, that's the thing is it is super close because I think if you're playing a really mid-rangey Najeela list, I can definitely see this being like a halfway decent finisher because it allows you to get in damage without even by just attacking with your creatures and not needing to connect, which is interesting. So you can, if you do manage to attack and get in damage, you're effectively having the clock that your opponents have to deal with your threats. And having the card draw on it for 2 generic isn't the worst thing in the world, but it's not a fucking warrior, so no, it's not a Najeela card.
But neither is Refrain, to be fair. Neither is
that ending sold me.
You know,
I'm so.
Pongo is Derevi a warrior? So Pongo, we have a couple answers here. So we will throw it over to you. Is this indeed a Najeela card or not?
So I do like that Ian was quick to point out that this is probably like the closest. And obviously Sage kind of echoed that opinion, mentioning that, you know, you could conceivably imagine like a more mid-rangey Najeela where this would be sort of like a finisher type card. Now they were both also correct in saying that no, it's doesn't quite meet the threshold. I'm not even convinced that it would meet the threshold as a 2-drop instead of a 3-drop. Which, you know, mostly that has to do with the fact that it's fairly slow. And part of that is that Severina needs to attack herself. Right. So, you know, as a 3-drop, naturally you're playing it, essentially doing nothing with it right away, waiting for it to attack the next turn. Maybe, you know, if this happens, you know, sort of in your best case scenario on your second combat, then you're draining everybody at the table for like 4 or 5. And then, you know, for like 7, you know, I did the math at one point and she is not really better than most of the combat enhancers that you could play. You know, so for example, I mentioned a few earlier. She's not faster than those. You know, kind of where we're at with Najeela is that some of like these dedicated combat enhancer cards can get you there in 4 combats. You know, the table is dead after 4 combats. And that's kind of been like a wall. And it's hard to imagine a card really breaking past that wall just because of the way Najeela's math works out, the progression. You know, any card that would enhance that combat needs to, you know, factor in that in those first like couple of combats, you have like, you know, 4 attackers and like 7 attackers, and then it's like boom, I've got a million attackers.
Right.
So yeah, so getting there by combat 4 is considered, you know, the standard for like a card that might be a dedicated enhancer. Beyond that, I'm not actually convinced that for 2 mana, sacrificing a creature, gaining 2 life, and drawing a card is good enough.
Okay.
You know, I don't think that the complete package of this card, the rate on these abilities quite work out. So if this was a 2 mana card and that ability was a 1 mana ability, if both of those knobs were tweaked, then maybe. If you only tweak one of those knobs, then I still don't think it's good enough. And as is, it's not good enough.
I will say, I do think that in like my pod build of Najeela, it's a little more interesting, simply because of the fact that it is a 3-drop that can sacrifice Arena Rector, and I like here the point of a lot of having those 3 drops is Athena, come here. a lot of the 3-drops that you have, the point of having those 3-drops is so that you
can go
get
train.
Vivian,
Yeah.
you uptick on the 3-drop, and that's partially why you picked Najeela. So having a value engine that also sacks Academy Rector or Arena Rector, excuse me, is an interesting prospect in that deck. And
in the 99, it's kind of like a Minsk with upside if you look at it from that specific archetype.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of an interesting avenue. I'm probably going to test it a little bit. The problem with testing that card in that deck means that I have to play that card in that deck, and I have I have been enjoying not playing Najeela recently, but.
I think another thing worth mentioning is, Sage mentioned, perhaps in like a more mid-rangey shell, but I think the pick over that would still be something like Devilish Valet, where you could just like absolutely nuke somebody off the face of the earth, like on like
target player, or is it each?
No, Devilish Valet's power doubles each time a creature enters the battlefield.
Well, I meant the Commissar. Because
the Commissar is each.
This can at least like hit everybody, right? Yeah.
That's
what I was thinking.
But Devilish Valet, I think, will have more immediate impact. 1,
sure,
and 2, probably gets there in the same, like against the whole table, at least in a similar time frame. So I prefer the prospect of like immediately wiping out somebody on like combat 3. When it comes down, because it has haste for some reason.
Right.
And then, kind of like in the same amount of turns, taking out everybody else.
Right. So points. Time for points, Pongo. We did have Ian who did buzz in first. So how are we awarding points here?
I can't keep giving Ian points for having a faster internet connection.
Excuse me, I have a quick draw that is much the likes of the Marshals back in the day.
But no, I mean, both of the players raised very good points. I think Sage raised the more interesting point. But Ian naturally did get there first. So Ian, I'm gonna give you a solid 50 points. And
nice.
And Sage, because I certainly appreciated the point that you raised, it made me think a little bit. I'm going to also give you 25 points.
All right. So that brings us to the next card on our list, which is Thunderwolf Cavalry, which is a 4/4 Astartes warrior that costs 4 colorless and a white. It has first strike and says whenever Thunderwolf Cavalry deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. So players, is this a Najeela card? All right, Sage has buzzed in. Sage, is this a Najeela card?
I mean, listen, if we're not playing Ultramarines Honor Guard, we're certainly not playing this. Putting 1/1 counters on your dudes to pump them up at the after they've done combat damage, it's just win more. It's white. Like, white is probably the least played color in Najeela, and it's not worth it. Despite having cute puppies on it.
I like white cards, thank you.
I do too. Big fan. But this ain't it.
This ain't it. All right. Ian, any thoughts from you?
So my first thought is a bit of a memeier thought, which is, no, this is not a Najeela card. It's an 80s movie.
Thunderwolf Cavalry.
Right? Like Arnold Schwarzenegger stars in Thunderwolf Cavalry.
Directed by I'm trying to think of like
would pay to see it.
No, it's a direct to VHS movie. Absolutely. Yeah, that is definitely a straight to VHS.
In a world where people ride wolves.
One wolf stayed out in a storm for too long. Then he gained the power of Zeus.
Starring Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Probably a better movie than Thor: Love and Thunder.
I'm a wolf. But my real answer for this card is, so imagine like this card, right? Now imagine it costs 2 less mana and it had flying. This card exists. It's called Drana, Liberator of Malakir, and it's still not a Najeela card. So
Okay.
I would like to really just put that final pin in there.
Okay. Yeah. You bring up a valid point. Sage, what is your thought on this 80s action movie
Sage
that definitely had
Sage actually
music?
started this one off.
This definitely had. Oh, that's right. You did.
I mean, I'll take the opportunity for more points.
My brain is. I definitely did not wake up from a nap before we started.
You're
recording.
too deep in the Thunderwolf is what's happening.
I just in my
That's
brain.
also an 80s movie, but in a different part of the video store.
My brain just was like, oh man, this definitely. This was one of those 80s movies that had like a totally normal cast of like action stars. And then some fucking random ass like musician that just got the job, like Freddie Mercury as the Goblin or whatever. I don't know. Like, you know how they used to do that in those movies?
Sting plays the voice of the wolf, for sure.
Exactly. Sting plays the voice of the wolf.
Oh, and exec definitely like walks into his boss's office and he's like, "What if Mad Max,
Hear me out.
but wolves?"
Instead of
in the tundra.
Yeah,
Instead of everything
in the
that makes
desert.
it good, it's wolves.
It's wolves.
So Pongo, what are your opinions on this card, and how do you feel about the opinions shared here?
I mean, Ian raised an excellent point. It's certainly more of an 80s movie. Sorry, it's Drana, Liberator of Malakir, or whichever one, is absolutely kind of just the better version of this card. Mm-hmm. I think, Sage did buzz in first. And Sage, I think your conclusion was correct ultimately that this is not a Najeela card. I do disagree with the notion that you can't play this because it's a white card, especially considering it's a 5-drop. It's very easy to be able to pay 1 white by the time you have 5 mana, even in a 5-color deck. But I think you're ultimately you were sort of on the right track, and I agree with everything else. So you did buzz in first, so that's certainly worth something. So
Wow, all right.
We'll go with 50 points.
Cool pog.
50 points, all right.
50 points for Sage, and also Ian, for raising the most valuable points, probably of the evening, thus far. I'm going to award you 50 points as well. And in addition, a bonus, you are no longer a frog. You've transformed back into a prince.
You're no longer
so upsettingly
Ian.
long.
You're no longer just a 3/3 yourself that's a 3/3 and a frog.
Yeah.
You're just now yourself.
I've been un-omnibian. Thank you so much.
Yes, there you go. So after round 3, our point totals are we have Sage leading with a point total of 158 points. And the comedian, hey, did you know that your name is
I swear to
God damn it.
God, Callahan.
Ian has 141 points going into
It's a tight race.
round 4. So with that being said, let's head on over into round 4. The first card on our list over here is Ghyrson Starn Kelermorph, which is a 3/2 legendary creature that is a Tyrannid human that costs 1 colorless, a blue, and a red, that has Ward 2 and the ability 3 auto stubs. It's kind of hard to read the italicized letters sometimes. And the ability is whenever another source you control deals exactly 1 damage to a permanent or player, Ghyrson deals 2 damage to that permanent or players? So, players, is this a Najeela card? All right, Ian, you have buzzed in. What is your thoughts on this?
I guess my question is, and Pongo will have to address this in time, but what do we want for Najeela going into the future, right? Do we want Najeela to be a soulless husk of a deck, or do we want Najeela to have a rootin' tootin' space cowboy shooting 2 damage anytime something does 1 damage to something? And I think pew pew, exact. Thank you, Sage. I believe Sage deserves additional points just for mentioning the pew pew. This is actually very relevant.
All right, take 15 points from Ian and please transfer them to Sage.
Thank you.
You have lost.
I'm willing
15.
to give up these points.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But this hardy gunslinger here deserves to be in Najeela, whether or not it is, I guess, objectively correct to do so. And on top of that, Najeela's over here shooting out 1/1s like it was my Smith & Wesson firing from the hip. So I think that this Tyrannid human deserves to say draw a time or two, you know?
Okay. Okay. Sage, what are your sage words on this?
Oh, that's too much pressure now. So like Pongo said earlier, is that when we're looking for cards, we want to look at like 3 or lower. And so this definitely fits the bill for that, much like the Severina. But this actually has Ward 2, which is surprisingly notable. But the exactly 1 damage, I mean, it doesn't have to attack and to get it. It just gets it, from whenever. I think it's also interesting with the fact that Najeela is also running Chatterfang, and those squirrels are running around too with a lot of the incidental token damage. But at the end of the day, I think this is just too narrow of a card, and you already have more concise win conditions for Najeela, and I just don't think it gets there.
Okay, Pongo. So your thoughts on this? You have it's a rootin' tootin' fastest gun in the West take, and you have Sage just not thinking that's quite good enough. What are your thoughts, Pongo? Is this a Najeela card, or is this an on-fire garbage can?
Well, yeah, this is definitely an on-fire garbage can. I'm sorry, Ian. I appreciate the idea, that or the fact that this is a very, very cool card flavorfully and looks very, very cool. And certainly, in my younger days, I might have actually considered that enough of a pro to include the card in the deck. But as it turns out, once again, all these cards, the Najeela server has done the math for them. So big surprise. And even though this is like technically like a damage tripler for like the warrior tokens, it
Right.
still doesn't actually speed up the combat clock that significantly, somehow.
Really?
Yeah, well, because again, just because of the way the sort of exponential progression of Najeela works out.
Okay.
So it's just not enough extra damage to like warrant playing this card, over some other card that theoretically, is just like a purely, pure combat enhancer that gets you there on combat 4, let's say.
Okay.
Some of the upsides of this card are that like, you could imagine that it kind of gives things like pseudo unblockable, but like realistically, like it's the same as just like any Anthem effect in that respect. So really it's just a damage enhancer. And those are not that exciting, again, like,
Okay.
we're not playing sort of the peak, the top 2, I would say, like major damage enhancers, which are on the one hand, what's his name? The creature there, Jetmir. And then on the other hand, there's the enchantment, Shared Animosity, which I think those are like mathematically the 2 sort of like best pure combat damage enhancers.
Right.
And so, this doesn't really line up well against either of those. And while the Ward 2, I do agree, is really interesting, and Ward 2 is kind of like where I start paying attention.
Right.
This is just not a card that I'm like imagine people care to remove all that much anyway. So the word is kind of just token text, when you're not building around this card specifically, I should say. There are cool things you can do with this card, but I don't think it's specifically playing it in Najeela.
Well, let's award some a point. So based on your assessment of their reviews, what are your thoughts here, Pongo?
Well, I don't appreciate that Ian was threatening me with the threat of violence of guns again. Those are very transparent attempts to try to bully me as the judge, as it were. But I've already penalized Ian enough.
Sorry, my washing machine exploded all over my kitchen.
Oh,
so I literally just had to clean up, like my entire kitchen floor was just covered in suds, and I was just cleaning that up.
Nice.
Oh no.
Well, now I feel bad. So Ian,
yeah, he was just penalizing you.
I am going to award you the 15 points that I took from you earlier that I gave to Sage.
Thank you so much.
You can have those back.
Okay.
And
holy shit, that was wild.
And an additional 60 points because you have to deal with that. But in the future, don't threaten me with violence again.
Fair enough.
And Sage, I think, I appreciated what you had to say about the card. I think that you raised valuable points. So I'm also going to award you 47 points.
47 points.
This feels oddly specific.
Yes, it is oddly specific, but that's okay. The next card here of this fourth round is Vexilus Praetor. It is a 3/4 Custodes warrior that it costs 3 colorless in a white. It has Flash, Vigilance, and Aegis of the Emperor. Commanders you control have protection from everything. So, players, is this a Najeela card? All right. And Mr. Ian, are you sure you're prepared to answer this? It's, there's suds all over your dining room or your kitchen.
Emotionally, I guess I am at the much like the suds erupting from my washing machine. I am at an exploding point, but I think I will be okay.
Okay, so is Vexilus Praetor a Najeela card?
So, things that are positives for this card. It is a warrior. It comes in at instant speed, and it protects your commander.
Okay.
Negatives for this card: the mana cost. Okay. Now, it may seem like that's an outweighed scale, but it's a pretty solid negative. 4 mana is, as Pongo mentioned earlier, a culling ritual amount of mana, and 1 mana away from an ad nause, or a Toski amount of mana. And a God's Willing costs a single mana and lets you scry. So I don't know why a God's Willing on a body really does that much more to help you in securing victory. I think the card is definitely cool, but the cost is just... I mean, if this was like 2 mana, then I think this would be actually a playable card. But even
2 mana, 1/2,
3
mana,
sweet. Yeah, even at 3 mana, I would not play this card. So I highly doubt Pongo, master of all card quality, will allow this to darken.
Well, Ian, Sage, you do have the floor now. What is your take on this magic card?
Listen, in the year of our Lord 2022, we cannot be flashing people anymore. That is just not okay.
Oh my goodness.
So,
okay.
4 mana for a 3/4 with vigilance, it doesn't even have evasion, it doesn't draw cards, it's just to protect Najeela, and Najeela only costs 3 mana. It's fairly easy to recast time after time or to pivot to a different plan if that plan has fallen through. So it's just a heckin' nope from me.
Okay. Big heckin' nope. Pongo, I do know you have some thoughts on this card specifically. So what is this a Najeela card?
Well, I just have to say before anything else, yes, it is 2022, but in 2022, we will soon be able to Mind Goblin. So I totally think
please don't make me have to interact with that card. Just you know what? I'm going to cut this from the episode.
It's only fair for me to be able to flash in my Ogma and tell people to Ogma while, they Mind Goblin. Callahan's shaking their head. So I think that Ian raises an excellent point about the mana cost of this card. Ultimately, that's kind of the major lever that Wizards of the Coast has that they can pull and push to make a card, well, no pun intended, literally pushed or not. If you make a card cost 1 less mana or 1 more mana, that can be sort of make or break for a card's competitive viability. And we see this sort of time and time again with, the majority of competitive formats. Most cards, topping out at like 3 mana in terms of mana value, mana cost, with rare exceptions. So paying 4 mana for this is a tough sell. It also just, I think, compares very, very poorly to another 4 mana flash threat, which is Notion Thief. Like, I think if I wanted to play a 4 mana flash threat, I would just play Notion Thief like every time and just say like to hell with the protection for my commander. The thing about Najeela, the way it's built, is that the deck tries not to be over reliant on the commander sort of as much as possible, because that's a common axis that people want to fight you on. On the one hand, this protects you on that axis. On the other hand, it costs 4 mana to do that. And it's much easier for people to say, here's my 1 mana removal before your 4 mana protection piece comes down. I do like the thought of this being a 2-drop. That was titillating. Ian's suggestion of this as a 2 mana card. I would certainly appreciate that being printed, because I would, pretty strongly consider that at like counterspell mana. But at 4 mana, it's too much. Yeah. So yeah. Not a Najeela card. And I'm sorry.
So points that we're handing out.
Don't even fully understand why Phoenix is still testing it. Sorry, Phoenix.
I will say, as far as
Phoenix is actually testing this card. Interesting.
But Phoenix also just kind of knows that it's like futile to test it. It's kind of just
I really like it in what's the deck? Lavinia specifically. It's quite good there. Giving Lavinia protection from everything is pretty okay. But we're not here to talk about Lavinia. Pongo, what are your points that you're dishing out here for this round?
Well, so Ian once again got there first on the buzzer. We're gonna need to, we need to slow down that internet connection of yours or something. So let's see. We're going to go with 60 points for Ian for raising good points. And I think that Sage also raised some valuable points. So let's go with 40 points for Sage.
40 points for Sage. Okay. So that makes our point totals going into our 5th and final round. Sage, 245 points, and Ian, 276 points. This is our final round. Let's get into it. The last 2 cards that we will be discussing today. The first card on that list is Abaddon the Despoiler, which
Callahan.
is a 5.
No, Callahan.
What?
Oh, come on.
You lose all
Abaddon.
points.
Abaddon?
Abaddon. This is a real name that people have.
Okay. Is it a real name people have?
Mm-hmm.
I have never met a single person named Abaddon.
I've also never met an Abaddon.
It's
but
old-timey as fuck.
yeah.
Okay.
But
so
I don't think it's a common enough name that I would fault Callahan for that.
yeah,
It's just more specifically the way you made the mistake. The specific mistake you made was particularly offensive to me.
Abaddon the Despoiler, which is a 5/5 legendary Astartes warrior that has trample and the keyword ability of Mark of Chaos Ascendant, which during your turn, spells you cast from your hand with mana value X or less have Cascade, where X is the total amount of life opponents have lost this turn. So, players, is this a Najeela card? Oh, you both buzzed in very quickly, and it looks like Ian did just barely beat you out. But
Rude.
Ian, is Abaddon a Najeela card?
Well, I've been waiting with a bedated breath for this, but here's a despoiler alert. There is no reason to play this card. Hear me out, though. Have we ever played Yidris in Najeela?
That's what I was going to say.
If not, or would be suspect of this card. Now, you may say, well, Ian, you fool. You could spend 5 mana, then go to combat with Najeela, and then all your spells have Cascade. And I would say, sure. Now, what mana are you holding up after you've cast your 5 mana Astartes Warrior, Abadabadu? And then I would have some questions about how you already won this game and how you haven't already won this game. Yes.
Who has it sounds like a Philadelphia style griddle, like somebody's cooking cheesesteaks in the background.
Or it's like raining somewhere.
My partner's cooking dinner.
Okay. Okay. I was like, it just I can hear the sizzle, and I was
sizzle,
like, yeah. So
but you could not hear my washing machine explode.
I could not hear your washing machine. So that is a positive, at least. So Sage, you also think that this kind of falls into that Yidris category. What are your thoughts on the card?
Yeah, so I mean, because there are no other cards in Najeela that are really going to make your opponents lose life, which would be the upside of Abaddon, which is that you don't have to have gone to combat in order to get that cascade trigger. As long as they've just lost life, then you turn that ability on. But there's nothing else that's going to turn that on to make this card active in Najeela. It's 5 mana and 3 colors, which is just such a restrictive casting cost, and with no way to cheat it in. It's a shitty reanimation target. Why even waste your time with that? And I mean, and it hurts me because as much as I love anyone who heralds together the fractured, legions of chaos, I love that, but it's just not for this deck.
Oh, it's definitely a vibe for sure.
So Pongo, do you agree with them? Is this not a Najeela card?
Yeah, it turns out it's not a Najeela card. To no one's surprise, perhaps. I think that the points that were raised were very good. Once again, we're seeing designs that are very much they have not been pushed for competitive play. Let's put it that way. And that is primarily to do with the mana costs, but also to do with the fact that they tend to have sort of bigger, splashier effects that tend to scale well, maybe more into longer games, more casual games, stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, that's just the design philosophy of the product. And it's, who the product's for. It's not really for cEDH players.
Except those skull clamps just look beautiful.
What? The skull clamp in the product,
skull clamp, yes. in the
reprints
product
are nice.
very
yes.
good. Yes,
I'm a big fan of a lot of the reprints and the arts and stuff like that. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah. So beyond the points that were raised, I think is kind of just the other big thing that neither of our lovely guests touched upon, which is just why would I care to have this effect in Najeela? What am I cascading into?
Mm-hmm.
Yidris as a deck, and one imagines Abaddon as a deck too, depending on how you would brew it, would be built to really leverage that cascading effect, such that, you know, you're going to be able to cascade your 1-drops into some of the more powerful 0-drops, or you know, alternate casting cost, no mana cost spells, like Profane Tutor type stuff.
Right.
But like, those are not cards that I want to play in Najeela, and like, I am not particularly excited by the prospect of needing to play my 5-mana spell so that I can like cascade my
into a 2-mana demonic tutor,
3-mana whatever value engine type cards into counter spells. Like, what am I cascading into, right? So it's just thematically doesn't really fit with the deck either, which is something that neither of the players touched upon. So in addition to you know, this whole round having been soured from the very start, because of your pronunciation of Abaddon, I'm going to have to not award nearly as many points as I was allotted for this round. So unfortunately, it's just going to be 50 points for both of the players.
50 points for both of the players, which does not really move the needle a whole lot as we're coming down the stretch. So this is the final card of the evening, and that is Marneus Calgar, which is a 3/5 legendary Astartes warrior that costs 2 colorless, a white, a blue, and a black. And it has double strike and 2 different abilities. One is Master Tactician. Whenever 1 or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. And Chapter Master, which costs 6 colorless mana to activate, create 2/2 white Astartes warrior creature tokens with vigilance. So let me clear the buzzers here for you players. Is this a Najeela card? Sage, you buzzed in first. Sage, is our friend Marneus here a Najeela card?
The fact that it says whenever 1 or more tokens enter the battlefield, draw a card is just right off the bat is no way. Like, if you want to draw cards from your warriors entering the battlefield, like Rite of Harmony exists, Welcoming Vampire exists. You know, those are 2 or 3 mana cards that are going to draw you card for having your warriors enter the battlefield. So the fact that this costs 5 to get that effect is so late in the game, and is just not worth it. This is not ad nauseum level good card advantage, because also taking up the 5-mana slot is terrible. And with the activated ability to make warriors, like, that's kind of interesting, but I think he's better as like the head of his own deck, as having potentially, you know, an Esper based you know, Scepter combo outlet, but not Najeela. This is nowhere near ad naus good.
Okay. Ian, your thoughts on our final card here?
Yeah, I'm just going to take this moment to say, hey, audience, you know, I know you've listened to a lot of cards here, and none of them really being slightly playable, but I really hope you enjoyed the journey. I really hope you enjoyed the fact that a 1-second meme really turned into an entire full-length episode.
Yeah.
Just want to say thanks to Cal for really committing to the bit. I really want to say thanks to me for being so clever to put comedian and my own name in it. I want to thank Sage for putting up with the stupid shit that we say. And I want to thank Pongo for trying to quantify these into real numbers. No, Marneus Calgar is not a Najeela card. It's a fine enough card on its own. And I hope to double strike out on this last one here.
All right. So Pongo, the consensus is no. It is not a Najeela card. I'm assuming you also agree with that. No, it is not a Najeela card.
Yeah, on the whole, I agree with the no. This is one that like really hurts to have to say no to, though, because it's such a sweet card, and it is a very, very powerful card.
Yeah.
For 4 mana, I could see myself trying it out. And probably not being excited still, because you know, I currently don't even play Toski. Now, it is worth mentioning, in case it wasn't clear, the Master Tactician ability and the way that interacts with Najeela is that Najeela, each warrior that enters play is like is from a separate trigger. So that ends up triggering Marneus Calgar a lot. So you end up drawing a lot of cards. And the double strike surprisingly relevant as well. Because
they're individual triggers.
Yes, they're individual triggers. So neither of our guests perhaps noticed that. So you would draw a card for each additional warrior that comes into play. So there is a world where this ends up being, let's say, close to Adnaw's levels of card advantage, but you're very much winning at that point already. And I think Sage raised an excellent point to comparing this to Rite of Harmony, which, Rite of Harmony has that exact same effect, that exact same interaction with Najeela for 2 mana, and then you can do it again for 4 mana at instant speed. So it's a little bit better insulated against potential removal because you just cast it with the Najeela triggers on the stack. You can flash it back if it gets countered, etc., etc. So not quite good enough. Again, tweak those knobs a little bit, and this gets close. And then the 6 mana sync type ability is obviously not something that you're gonna really ever activate unless things are going horribly wrong. But yeah, I think that it's a compelling combination of abilities, and I forgot to even mention the double strike, or I started on that. The double strike is relevant for things like Grim Hireling, things like Professional Facebreaker. So yeah,
Derevi.
Yeah, for Derevi, exactly. It's an extra trigger. So it is a nice keyword to have. It's a very broken keyword, in fact. So this is actually, I would say, surprisingly close, but still miles away from good enough. Which I know that kind of sounds like a little bit like an oxymoron. Perhaps that's mostly reflective of how much I really wanted this card to be good enough, but it doesn't quite get there.
So how many points are we giving out to our contestants here for this final card?
All right. Well, I think the contestants all raised some excellent points. I think that, not missing out on the interaction with Najeela's ability, that both of our guests missed that, so I won't dock anyone in particular about that. But we're up at the end of the show here, and I believe it was Sage who buzzed in first, if I'm not mistaken.
It was indeed Sage.
Yeah. Sage, I think you're gonna go ahead and get 78 points. And Ian,
okay,
for raising good points, I am also going to award you 52 points.
This is so specific. Something's up. I don't have the point totals in front of me.
Okay.
Does that make it a tie?
Well, let me calculate
If it does,
here.
I'd be surprised.
All right. So the totals are in. Sage, after 5 rounds of Is This A Najeela Card competitive play, has a total of 373 points. Ian has a total of, drumroll, 378 points.
But wait.
So Ian.
But wait.
Okay.
I have 3 final stars to hand out.
Okay.
At the end.
3 final stars.
No, it's Mario Party.
Okay.
The worst
Mario Party.
I put in that rule.
I have here the coin star to hand out. The coin star goes to Sage for having won the greatest amount of points in any single round. So congratulations, Sage. The coin star is worth,
I'll take it.
420 points.
Nice.
Word.
Nice. Okay.
The minigame star goes to Ian for buzzing in and winning the most rounds that way.
Quick hand.
And the minigame star is worth 469 points.
Nice.
And finally,
Sexy.
the Happening Star. Drumroll, please.
What is the Happening Star?
The Happening Star goes to Ian for having the best jokes of the night.
Aw,
Woo!
fair.
Okay.
I definitely concede to that.
And Ian, the Happening Star is worth another 420 points. Congratulations.
Nice.
That brings
Thank you so
the
much.
point totals to Sage 793, a measly 793 points. While Ian has a whopping 1,267 points.
You gotta give him 2 more points.
Nice.
No, unfortunately, listen, I'm just calculating the totals, all right, you know? But thank you all for joining me on this. We, you know, as Ian pointed out, we did kind of have a little bit of fun with this on the last set review. And so I figured we could do, since this was a lot of warriors in this set, although I will say that there are a couple Buicks in this set as well. That we definitely did get to talk about, but there are just some stuff in this set that's really cool.